part of my story.
All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Art of Intervention Project. And Karen and I got to meet each other down in Florida on kind of a joint trip, visiting a treatment center down there. And I love what she does, high energy to help people. And so, Karen, give people kind of maybe a couple sentence intro on who is Karen.
Wow. Well, because I'm turning 60, that's hard to do. You know, it's a lot of years of living. So what brought me into the field, though, was my own addiction and recovery. And I've never stopped, after getting into recovery, I've never stopped learning about human nature and what drives addiction. So it's a passion of mine.
Yeah, and a lot of interventionists, right, come from a world of addiction typically, or a family member or something. And we'll definitely get more into kind of your story as well. But before we started this, it was fun. I like to get little tidbits on intervention because we want people to know, like, hey, you're real people. You love what you do, and you're passionate about it. But behind you, in the picture there, tell me a little bit about what that picture is back there.
Well, it's a mandala. And my aunt Tanya, was an artist. She has since passed. But this was her type of art. And she did very meditative, beautiful colors. And this was just her, you know, one of her things. And I'm an artist as well, but my style is very different.
All right,
my
cool.
style of work.
We'll have to see your art show coming up down the pipeline at some point. You know, it's fun. And are you a pet lover at all? Like, do you have pets? Are you an animal person?
My art is all wildlife.
Okay.
So I'm very passionate about wildlife. I do not have a pet currently because I travel a lot. So no.
Yes, you do. Yeah, that would be hard. And we're definitely dog people here. But so you're up in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes,
you travel all over the country for doing interventions, which is very exciting. So when family members tap into this project that we're doing here, you know, one of the common questions is like, what is an intervention? So how would you just generally describe what an intervention is?
Sure. Well, an intervention is a very conscious, intentional attempt to organize a family system to help a loved one. I mean, interventions come in many forms, but if we're talking about a professionally led intervention, then it's going to be very well organized and structured to help the family help their loved one.
Most definitely. And that's where it's a key piece to have someone like yourself to help the family navigate this process.
Yeah, I don't recommend doing it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, having that neutral party in there. But what would you say the benefit is of having interventionists like plan this and put this together?
I think families need a leader when it comes to addiction because it's usually torn them apart and people are on different pages. People have been pointing fingers at one another, looking to blame, looking to, help, but not effectively. So if you can hire somebody who's well-credentialed and experienced in helping addicted individuals and knows the industry, they can guide the family in making best choices and stay focused on the goal at hand, which is getting that loved one to accept help.
Yeah, and that help can look at many different shapes and forms, right? It's not always like going to a treatment center, or there's a lot of different ways that people can go get help as a result of an intervention. But they're calling you because they have a loved one that has an addiction problem, right? And so what's your kind of broad scope definition of what is an addiction?
Well, it's really any compulsive behavior that has brought the person to a place in their lives where they're not achieving their goals, they're not functioning properly. So it can be a behavioral addiction and it can be a drug addiction, but eventually that compulsive behavior will rewire the brain and the person no longer has control over the behavior. So that's my definition of addiction. It's also, from personal experience, it's bondage and it's suffering.
Yeah, those are pretty deep, powerful words right there, bondage and suffering.
Yes.
For sure. And so they come to this, I want to get in the process of what the addiction looks like, what the intervention looks like. But so here we have this kind of general definition of addiction from kind of your vantage point. And then how do you define kind of recovery? Like people say they're in recovery, but what does that mean to you to be in recovery?
Well, I can tell you what it means for me, but I think it's different. It may be different for different people. So, I look at recovery as a process, just as, addiction was a process.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, if you're moving in the right direction, meaning away from, I like the abstinence model. I know it's not for everybody, but it's a good starting point for a lot of people. But it isn't recovery. So putting a drink down or putting a drug down or putting a behavior down isn't recovery, but it's the first step towards a process. And then, I look at it as a developmental process, almost like a maturing process, where you must go through the developmental stages that you might have skipped or missed for various reasons in one's life, whether it was trauma or an enabling family system or whatever the reasons. We all have reasons. It's about growing up, and it's also about learning how to have fun. So, it's a combination of things, but it's a freedom, and it's really the opposite of what addiction is.
Yeah, and it's community and all those things. And when you sit there and think
Yes,
about
reconnection.
yeah, when you think about, you said like the brain development and those things, or you're alluding to that too, but talk about kind of like the brain development, so families can maybe see their loved one in maybe a different light. It's not just the substances or the addiction, but there's a lot going on up here.
Yeah. Well, what happens is the brain is literally rewired by the compulsive behavior, and there are new pathways carved, which are not good. It's like learning how to ride a bike, only, you never forget, right? With addiction, it's the chemical pathways that are carved are going to be remembered forever, which is why, from my opinion, again, it's not okay to play around the edges with addiction, because your brain will always remember and can revert back. So the brain is literally hijacked in the course of addiction. There's a line that gets crossed. So I like to explain that to family members so that they don't, they become more compassionate towards their loved one. And really, if we're honest with ourselves, we've all experienced addiction to something. We're a nation of addicts. I like to say to my family members or audience, how many of you would like to lose weight? Well, a million hands go up. Well, why haven't you? What's the problem?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's not just about motivation. It's, it's really hard to change. And we want to bring that understanding to the family members so they have more compassion for their loved one.
Perfect. Yeah. And part of the art, I do the art of intervention. We go addiction, recovery, and transformation. So in your own world, how has your life been like transformed by no longer being in your addictions? And how do you see that in other people?
Well, I have 34 years in recovery, so it's really, it looks nothing like it once did, right? And I have all these awarenesses, of consciousness raising, it's spirituality, it's lifestyle change, it's healthy living, it's continual work on myself so that I continue to evolve, to help others and be a power of example to others. Because I believe in walking the walk. It's not just, I go to a training and now I'm going to tell you what to do. No.
Yeah.
I have to show you what recovery looks like. I have to make it attractive to you, So yeah, for me, it's about complete lifestyle change, and that's what it is.
Yeah, cool. Because you practice that. You're an avid biker, right? That's one of your outlets for
mountain biking. Biking. And what's interesting is I moved to Colorado, and I was in the grips of my addiction in Colorado, living in a beautiful. I was in the Roaring Fork Valley between Aspen and Glenwood Springs. You may know the area.
Yeah.
And thinking I would be free, and that was my goal, was to be free. But I was in the grips of my addiction, so I couldn't appreciate the beauty around me. And now, I've got my health back, and I'm pursuing my passions. I'm pursuing creativity, my, art and writing and, just music. I mean, so many things that I love to do.
Perfect. How do people connect with you? I want to throw that out now, and then we're going to actually get into the intervention process. How do people connect with you?
Well, through my website, or, a lot of people connect with me via word of mouth. I get a lot of referrals, word of mouth, website, Psychology Today, LinkedIn. I'm on all those.
Cool. What's your website real quick?
Addictionresolution.com.
Okay. So I want y'all to tap into that too as we kind of dive into this process. So here we are. You're hanging out in your office, wherever you are. Maybe on the mountain bike path. Who knows? Your phone rings, family calls, and says,
Okay.
"My loved one needs help."
Yeah.
What does it start to look like for them, and how this intervention process unfolds?
Sure. Well, if I'm on a trail, I'm going to call them back because I need to take notes. I need to take notes. So as soon as I can get to a place where I can get a pen in hand and a pad, I'm going to let them talk, because oftentimes they're calling out of desperation. We know that. So I'll let them talk a little bit, and then I'll start guiding them and asking them some very important questions about the loved one they're concerned about. That's what they're calling to tell me, is the history and all these horror stories and all the things they've done. And, I don't need all the war stories. I need to know, have they ever had treatment before? Do they have any mental illness? What's their current state of health? What does the family system look like? Who's interested in participating? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of questions I'm going to start asking the individual who calls.
And then
why are they calling me?
Yeah, why they're calling you, right?
At this time, yeah.
And are you the right fit?
Yes, sure.
That's the one thing I want people to hear, and why I'm interviewing a lot of different interventionists in the Art of Intervention project is because there's a connection piece that you have with the person that's going to be working with you.
Yeah, what I have found is that usually somebody gives somebody my name, so they're not shopping around beyond that. Although there are times I've gotten calls from family members who are interviewing interventionists, and I'm just one of a handful of interventionists they're interviewing.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we get to this point, you figure out that you are the right fit, you can help the family. What do the next steps look like for them?
Well, we're going to set up a meeting as soon as possible with anybody and everybody who's interested in participating. So I start to assess who those folks are. And we usually meet as soon as possible, as soon as they'd like. Now, I work a lot regionally, so I'm able to travel locally and meet with families. So I can meet with them over the course of weeks if necessary. And sometimes that's how it goes. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's right. There you go. That's what happens, right? People are calling.
Oh, maybe I can't turn the ringer off. Hold on a second.
All right, no worries.
Okay.
All right, so go back to when you said you'll travel regionally and those things and kind of.
Yeah. So one of the things I have found, Rob, is that, people say they want an intervention, but it's kind of scary, right? It's kind of scary, like really what's involved. Maybe they only know the A&E show, or they really don't know what's involved. So what I'll offer families, this is one of the things I'll do, is a consultation. I'll say, you don't have to make any commitment. Let's just talk. Let's have that family meeting. I'll charge them a consultation fee if they decide to move forward. We'll just roll that into the fee of the intervention, but they don't have to move forward. So I give them that permission, that let's talk and let's lay out the options, because until I get to know them, I don't know, what's the best direction to go. So I really need a lot of input from them. So I encourage them to do that consultation. I know they're going to get a lot out of it. They're going to be educated, informed, more empowered, and then they can decide if they want to move forward from there. So that's, oftentimes, they can go in so many different directions, these interventions,
And how important is it for the families to just really be open and kind of lay it all out for you? Because you're trying to gather information, right?
Yes. Well, and that's a great question, because what happens is, there's always family secrets. I encourage them to be as honest, with each other as they can. It's not about me. The way I work is I want them talking to each other. Yes, I'm leading them. Yes, I'm guiding them. But I want them to start communicating with each other and start getting more honest and start hearing, what other people are saying who have different information or different perceptions of what's happening in that family system. And that's a big goal of doing intervention. It's helping that family, helping the family system.
And also bring in expertise. And the next step is kind of like, how do you figure out what is the treatment plan? Like, how do you give them one option? Do you give them three options? Like, what do you do?
Well, so there's two things I'm doing. I'm both assessing the family dynamics, And then I'm also assessing the addicted individual. So by the time most families call me, we are looking at usually detox and residential treatment. I mean, because families do not call early on in the addiction process. It's usually quite progressed by the time they reach out. So what I do is I talk to them about their resources. Are we using insurance? Are we going to be self-pay? I need to understand that. I will work with if they have insurance, let's try to use insurance, right? And most families want to do that if they can.
Yeah.
So I take a look at that card. I mean, I have folks at different treatment centers that I work with that are highly respected treatment centers. And we start to take a look at, what's a good fit. I travel and I visit, like Hanley, and I was very impressed, right? So they're now on my list, but I don't refer anywhere that I have not gone to see and visited and met with the clinical staff myself. Mm-hmm.
That's huge for everyone listening, because you're not a 1-800 number, right, that has the fake doctor on the TV that says, call us and we're going to broker you to the next place.
No.
So how does it look when you're doing the assessments and you're talking to the family and they say, loved one XYZ has been to 7 treatment centers before. So how do you look at that? Because I know we get those calls too, and it's like, I just don't know if I want to invest. I mean, this is the 18th treatment center, and it's amazing when you hear those numbers, but some people see going to detox for 2 days as treatment, which it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So how do you look at the kid that's been, or wife, husband, somebody that's been to 5 legit treatment centers?
Well, I would ask how long they stayed, sober, try to get a sense of what worked, what didn't work, what aspects may have worked. Oftentimes what I find is that there wasn't family work necessarily being done. So I'm going to encourage that. I try to look at what was missing from that treatment plan. And if there wasn't family work being done, I'm going to really encourage something like structured family recovery. I might recommend a program that's a lot smaller. I'm going to look at if there's trauma that wasn't addressed, like what was missing. So it's a lot of conversation, a lot of assessing. Yeah.
It's important for people to hear about you because you are huge into families. And I was looking at your website. I'm going to read this off your website real quick because I like where it says, "Dear families," on the front page, "my deepest hope is to alleviate the suffering caused by addiction and bring families back to each other through the transformative process of recovery." Mm-hmm. And so why is working with the family system so important in this?
Because underneath the addiction is a deep, deep desire to be connected. Underneath, not just the addicted individual who may be using a substance, but the rest of the family who's numbing out in whatever ways they're numbing out, right? There's a million different behavioral addictions that are going on in that family system usually. Right. Because, and we have to look at, I studied with Judith Landau. She goes back 5 generations in terms of doing a genogram. I don't go back that far, but I do like to help families make the connection so they recognize that this didn't just start here. All of this has been programmed. What did you learn from your family system? How did your parents get along? Where was the addiction in that system? How did you learn how to cope? How was stress managed? So with that information, they can start recognizing that, I need to look at some of this myself. Maybe I can make some changes. So there's a way of approaching the family so that they take the focus off the addict who's feeling terrible about themselves anyway. And even if the family's not intending to shame or blame, a lot of that has gone on. So trying to bring that focus back to everybody taking responsibility for themselves and being accountable for their own recovery goals. That's how I like to work with families, ideally. And it's a beautiful process when people are willing to participate, whoever's willing to participate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so before we get into kind of like the day of the intervention, you mentioned another interventionist, Judith Landau, the Reass model. There's different ways to approach this, right?
Correct.
And so in your background and kind of what you have done, what are some different ways that I know it's different, right? I guess not particularly you, but what are different methods that people use to do interventions? Let's just say that.
Well, I think there's basically 2. One is invitational and one is more of a surprise model. like the old Johnson model. There's a lot of variations on it, and there's a few variations on the invitational model. But those are the two basic models. I've been trained in both and others as well, even CRAFT. I don't know if you're familiar with CRAFT, which really doesn't involve the addict at all. You work exclusively with the family, which is very interesting.
I haven't heard of CRAFT before, but I'm going to look into that. That's great.
Okay. It's community restructuring and community restructuring and family training. Okay. Community restructuring and family training. CRAFT. Okay, gotcha. Robert Myers. Yeah. So I am certified in the Love First model, which is Jeff and Deborah Jay's model. You're probably familiar with that. That's what I typically use. I kind of open it up to the family. Now, sometimes if we're dealing with somebody who's highly anxious or elderly or a little more fragile, I don't want to do a surprise intervention with them. And I want that family to tell them right up front, we're meeting, we want you to join us, and let's work together. So it really depends. So I will kind of step in more strongly if I feel it's not a good idea to use the surprise model. Families often want to use the surprise model. It just depends on who the individual is.
Right, because it's kind of an art of calling audibles too. You're going this direction, right? And then you got to switch to this direction sometimes based on what happens with the situation. Mm-hmm. So here we are, day of intervention. Like it's planned. We got a place picked out. Everyone's ready to go. What does that day look like? Typically. Well,
the day looks like everybody showing up if it's a surprise. Everybody showing up at the planned time and place to meet with their loved one, it's usually in the morning. Usually like to approach people in the morning before they have a chance to start using their substances for the day. But keeping in mind that what's been planned is like everything, including the fact that we're going to walk in where people are generally going to sit, where we're going to invite that addicted loved one to sit. Who do they feel most supported by? We want them sitting kind of sandwiched between those people. We've already strategized for objections and what if they get up and leave? Who's going to follow them out the door and guide them back? But generally speaking, I do use letters because I think it helps people to organize their thoughts. I'm not the kind of person who say, you have to use a letter and you have to use my structure, but I give it to people. And I say, this is, a way to organize your thoughts. However, there are times people want to speak from the heart, right? I trust the process, I've had a lot of interesting experiences with interventions where something, larger takes over and it just goes the way it's supposed to, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we do have letters because it helps people feel safe and prepared. And we ask the alcoholic or the addict or, whoever's struggling to just sit and listen and, not respond, not talk, just listen. And we go in a certain order. Sometimes that order is predetermined, or sometimes because I've learned who the family members are, I work very intuitively and I just feel who needs to talk next. And I can, it's like the art of intervention. I call it an art too, because I feel like I'm conducting like an orchestra. I've orchestrated this thing and now I'm going to conduct it.
Yeah.
But it's a very light hand. I'm not the central figure. I'm, making this happen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's definitely a flow that happens and you adjust accordingly. And so here we are in this moment, right? Loved one says, okay, I'm going or I'm not going to go. How do you handle those?
Well, if they're going, as you say, we have predetermined a place, made sure they, beds available and how they're getting there. It's all predetermined. If they don't go, we have a sort of a plan B, which is using leverage, right? Part of planning for an intervention is finding out what that leverage is. Mm-hmm. We're hoping to appeal to their better self and not have to go to any kind of leverage. But things are going to change. If the intervention is going to be considered successful, the family needs to make some very significant changes. And so part of those bottom lines are what those changes are going to be, both how they will support recovery, but what changes they're going to make either way. if their addicted loved one says, no, I'm not going. My experience has been that once confronted, even though it's not a harsh, it's a loving, and dignified process, that's the intention. If they refuse and the family follows through with their intended changes that they're going to start to make, the addicted individual will usually say, yes, okay, I'm ready within a week or two. So it doesn't always happen right in that moment.
And you stay with the family for how long?
Well, it depends. So, it depends on what they're hiring me for. There's a second part to doing interventions, which is called family coaching or structured family recovery, because I can do either. One's a little more structured than the other. And that can be an ongoing process that can last a year, but the initial intervention is going to be, we're definitely going to meet after the intervention, kind of a debriefing meeting, and check in with everybody if they're in treatment, how are things going? And then we'll determine what are those next steps, and of course I encourage them to continue to work with me, or at least go to their own support groups, or, work with a coach, or,
Yeah.
I encourage them to continue to work together.
That's great. So you work with families on the front end and on the back end, and
yes,
there really isn't an end until they say, hey, I think we're good. We can do this. We're good. Thank you.
Well, yeah, relapse prevention is one of my specialties too. So yes, I'd really like to, not just leave them hanging, and let's look at what, how we prevent relapse.
Yeah. Well, I bring that up because, there are some interventionists out there that they just do the intervention. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. They're done. And that's, I want people to hear this, that this isn't an in and out, one and done thing. It's there's a process. Yeah. And it's they go, they don't go. You work with the family. You continue to help them with.
Well, the family is my client. Yeah, the family is my client. And you said the right word. Intervention is a process. I don't look at it as an event. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it continues to go on. And just so people hear these too, so who pays you? The family pays you. A treatment center pays you. How do you get paid by people?
The family.
Right. I want people to hear that.
Hiring me. I know I hear it, I know it goes on, but no.
Yeah. And I say that because you want an interventionist that is paid by you, the family, not by the treatment center to do that, because.
And I've never, to be honest with you, Rob, I've never been approached by a treatment center that's tried to do that type of thing with me. Yeah. So I work with very, very ethical folks, trained with ethical folks, and work with ethical programs. So there's none of that.
And that's why I want to invite you on here, because that's why I don't invite unethical people at all. It's all about people doing it right, doing the right way. They're all about the family. They're all about the loved one. They're all about the treatment. They're all about the aftercare. Right. And so how do you structure your business? Like, do you work by yourself? Do you have other people on your team that you work with? What does that look like? I
work by myself. I reach out for supervision and support because I work by myself. And it's a very intense work, obviously. So I do reach out to other interventionists all the time for feedback, for support, for ideas, in the middle of working with family systems. Yeah. And I also I'll work with coaches, sober coaches, if it's, I need assistance with transportation or something of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And inside of like your business travel, so you usually travel with your clients to the treatment. Is that kind of one of the services you do with your interventions?
I do. I offer that. Or, sometimes if the family has somebody that is solid to go, then that's fine. I've had no problems with that. I've also transported, escorted, and I've also had the family hire a more appropriate person to escort.
Yeah, there's definitely, like I said, that's why you have a team of people out there, right? We work by ourselves normally, but we have this huge team of people around the country. And
yes, exactly.
What sort of addictions do you work with doing interventions? Are there certain ones that maybe people call and say, that's kind of my cup of tea, but what do you work with?
So typically it's substance abuse. However, there's a lot of cross addiction. There was a family not too long ago that reached out to me because of their son had a sex addiction, but he was drug addicted as well. So I said to myself, well, I'm not an expert in sex addiction, although I've taken tons of training. I love Patrick Carnes and I've read everything, And I thought to myself, when we're organizing the family to ask somebody to get help, it doesn't really matter what the addiction is. my goal is to organize the family to say what they need to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do that. And then the only difference is finding the appropriate care. So hooking that young man up with the right treatment, somebody who specializes in sex addiction. So I will go, or eating disorders, they go hand in hand sometimes. So I won't say no because they have an eating disorder or they have a sex addiction or they have a gambling, because the cases are so complex anymore. There's layers and layers and layers.
Yeah, and those things can definitely come out while they're in their, first round of treatment somewhere. And it's like, okay, hey, and then the treatment centers I know you refer to, it's like, hey, okay, we need to now address this. And it's such a short period of time for a lot of them that's where the aftercare and everything you help plan comes into place. So I think that's pretty great how you're kind of this well-rounded interventionist that really puts the whole package together for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I do my due diligence,
Yes, you do. Yeah, you're very thorough, which is really cool. So what would you say to families listening right now and they want to call you, but they're scared to pick up the phone?
Mm-hmm. That's very understandable. So that what I would say is you don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to commit to anything. Just call and let's talk. And I'll give you some options that you may not have considered before. Or maybe even just some ways to take better care of yourself. Maybe you're not going to do anything at this point. But I'll listen, and if I hear some things that I'm concerned about, I'm going to feed back that information to you. And again, give you some options. If you don't want to do an intervention, maybe there's, something else we can do.
Okay. And what are some questions families should ask you when they call you? What are some things they should think about? Like, oh, this is what I should ask an interventionist, because there's a lot going on. So if they have them written down, what are some good things to bring to the table?
Well, they should ask any interventionist, and they don't. They don't.
Right.
But they should be asking me things like, well, what's your background? What's your training? I tell them, but sometimes they're not interested. They're just so caught up in what's going on. So I would encourage them to ask, what's your background? What's your training? How long have you been doing this? What is an intervention? Because they really often don't know. So what's involved? How many meetings? Who would be coming? What's your fee? How do we pay you? How do we pay for treatment? There's a lot of questions they should be asking, and not just focusing on telling me war stories.
Right. Yeah, because they're calling you for a short period of time. It's an initial call. They're getting information. What about insurance? Like, how important is that to know that an interventionist carries insurance?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do that to protect myself, but they never ask that, so I'm not sure. That's not something that they ever ask.
Yeah, no one's ever asked me to, because there's a lot of interventionists out there that are new in the field, as you know, and just popping up all over the place that don't have insurance. They're just out doing them. That's why you want to have someone like Karen be a lead person for you to do this, because she's seasoned and she knows what she's doing. And that's all the people that are part of this Art of Intervention project as well, is to have the right fit, but just to know, hey, we're normal people that are out there helping people. We like to ride bikes. We like to do paintings. We have fun in our life. We help people, and we're committed to the process as well. And so I thank you for just sharing everything you have so far. Is there anything else you want to share with kind of the listeners right now, that some words of encouragement or just anything on your heart?
Well, in terms of words of encouragement, I like to say that there's tremendous pain and there's always hope. And, just to not give up hope, but reach out. And it doesn't have to be to me. It can be to a local 12-step meeting, a local support group. They're everywhere. In most communities, there are family support groups. There's Families Anonymous. I would just say there's a whole lot of resources available. I'm assuming here in New York, we have a licensing body that's a great, their website is a great resource for communities and families in New York to find help. Low cost, no cost, it's available. So help is available, yeah.
Addiction doesn't discriminate, and neither does recovery, right? So we just want to get people in the right direction. And I just thanks for all you shared again. Give me your website one more time.
Sure, it's addictionresolution.com.
Okay, yeah, so check that out. Get a feel for how to help your loved one take action, today. If you're thinking there's a problem, there probably is. And it's good to just explore and talk through this with someone outside of family. That just, you know, and again, Karen and I, we've both been through the ringer in our own addictions, right? So we've been on both sides, you know, the family side and all those sides. So we definitely have a lot of deep empathy and passion for helping people. And, you know, it's fine. I just realized, like, I normally don't wear t-shirts during interviews, right? Like that, doing this, but I'm like, you know, I had this on earlier first. It says my dog rescued me.
I see.
that was like the night before I got sober 18 years ago. It was like, that was my dog rescued me. And, you know,
I had a dog that brought me through also and taught me so much. Yes, so I can really relate to that because I felt safer with an animal than I did with other human beings for a long time. So
yeah.
I understand that.
And a thought actually just came up because I know this question comes up to me every now and then. What do people say if people ever ask you, can I take my dog to treatment?
Oh yeah, there are places, you know. Yeah, there are.
If that's a sticking point, right? That's one of those objections. Well, I can't take Fido. It's like, well, hey, guess what? Fido can actually come to one because we knew you'd bring that up and he's important to you or she. So again, a lot of expertise in here that you just don't know in the general world, just walking around calling treatment centers. So call Karen, get some help, take some action. Thanks for your time today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Rob.
You got it.
Appreciate it.